So I was sitting down to work one morning and I got a phone call. Obviously, phone calls always happen as soon as you sit down to work. But this phone call was apparently from somebody at Meta. What made me especially newly uncomfortable about this was that it seemed like it was calculated to create a personal replica of my online presence. Fairly long time I've been a witness to the strange double standards that Americans and people in the West seem to have about the long-standing situation in Palestine. Given that Israel is carrying out a genocide in Gaza, it seems to me that this AI program of who to bomb and of how to find targets is really just a pretext for bombing whatever the hell they want.
There's been so much protest. There's this huge global uprising and where truth is being shouted in almost every language possible in all the capitals of the world. And yet it somehow seems to not be able to shift the ground beneath the power.
I think it's unclear to Indians how much the genocide in Gaza has to do with us. When we look at Israel, when India looks at Israel, we should see we're looking through a particular lens at what we could become if we give in to that ethno-nationalist desire. So I'm a journalist, right? I have spent most of my life working as a journalist. I do other things as well. And one of the awkward things about that for me is that I don't really like the news. He once said something that I think is very, very insightful about it. He said, Mahabharata is always your latest war. Don't ask why, or you can ask why later. I think
why later in the interview? Why off the camera?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a bit disparaging, but I'm just going to go with it. A kind of non-fiction uncle approach to history, which is
the most satisfying piece you've written purely as a writer, not as a journalist. India's most misread moment in history, according to you. Oscar Wilde had once written that the difference between literature and journalism is that journalism is unreadable and literature is not read. A clever line, even a truism perhaps, but when it comes to Raghu Karnad, his writings unsettle the very premise, because his journalism reads like literature and his literature reports from the trenches of history. And he moves between the two, not by switching registers, but by revealing how porous both the forms can really be. But like most of us, like all of us, Raghu writes from within the turbulence of a world that he's been thrown into. And for someone who tries to remain tender in a world that demands a cruel detachment, it is natural to feel uneasy and anxious at times. So let me start this interview with that anxiety and that unease. But first of all, thank you, Raghu, for accepting our invitation.
Thank you. And thank you. What a kind introduction. And I'm so happy to be in Calcutta, one of the most interesting cities in the world.
I'm so glad you feel that. But let me start with a very recent post that you made on Instagram. You recently had this almost existential conversation with your AI double, which Instagram had thrown at you. And you were actually asking something on the lines of, will I become redundant? So was that anxiety real? And if it was, what kind of anxiety was it actually?
Well, the anxiety is definitely real. I don't think I was necessarily really trying to get that answer from my AI twin. But what was happening in that moment was very strange for me.
Okay.
I'll tell you, let me contextualize it a little bit. So I was sitting down to work one morning and I got a phone call. Obviously, phone calls always happen as soon as you sit down to work. But this phone call was apparently from somebody at Meta or Instagram.
Okay.
This is what they said. So this woman on the phone was...
So it was like an Instagram call or like a proper phone call on your...
No, it was a regular phone call on a Bombay number.
Okay.
And someone who'd obviously been trained to do these calls in order to promote certain kinds of usage from, I think, from content creators.
Yeah.
So she was sort of flattering me and encouraging me to, talking to me about what kind of content I wanted to make. And this was surprising because I haven't been doing very much, relatively little on Instagram and on social media for the last couple of years. But So there was some flattery, and she was cajoling me to make more reels. None of this, this is quite expected.
Yeah.
And then what happened was she began to coax me to install a new feature, to use a new feature that had just been introduced on Instagram, in which you could create an AI persona, and that AI persona would then be available to talk to your followers and to your public. And according to what she said, that you could mold that AI persona to be your own, to be a reflection of you, like a duplicate of yourself. And that the more you interacted with them, the more they would resemble you. So I was so curious about this, and I was also being flattered. So I let my guard down. I installed this new feature, and before I knew it, I was asking my questions about the feature to the AI digital twin that I just created. And I asked it, so is it correct that the more data I give you and the more we have this conversation, the better you can replicate aspects of my mind, my thinking, my opinions, my style, my voice?
Yeah.
And the replica said, yes, that's exactly what the goal is. AI sometimes has these kind of uncanny moments of honesty. And that really made me stop short. And I thought, I have to stop using this feature, and I need to detach myself from this direction that AI is taking for sure. Because the last thing that I want to do is to give Meta for free a packaged version of my mind, a model basically of my personality and of my intellect for them to use and for them to own any way that they want. Because if I give that away, what exactly am I providing the rest, the rest of the time?
But do you really think it's possible? Like, so that was a real anxiety that you felt, right? And, but like, for example, like I believe that, all writers, or whenever we write, we're kind of writing, or we are thinking at the limits of language. It's like, someone had said that, writers write with the language that they do not yet possess. So, and these are ultimately large language models, and basically you just, they could not, achieve originality out of mimicking someone, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I really like the quote, the words you just said about writing at the limit of...
Yeah, the limits of language, and you write in a language that you do not yet possess,
That you don't yet possess.
Yeah.
I think that reflects my experience quite well. And it also captures why writing can so often be a difficult and kind of nervous process, because you're not writing inside your comfort zone. Well, lots of people do a lot of writing in their comfort zone. But ideally, if you're a literary writer, you are writing outside of your comfort zone, and you want to be a little bit nervous about what you're writing, because that's where the creativity is happening. That's definitely true. On the other hand, what really makes me nervous about this new direction of AI, which I want to give a disclaimer to anyone listening that I'm not an AI expert. I'm not attempting to accurately represent what any new feature on Meta or Instagram does. Only my impression that I got from this phone call from them and from the bot itself. We've taken some comfort in thinking that the way large language models work is they kind of aggregate these vast amounts of data, and then they create kind of highly anonymized models of language and models of thinking. That allows you to at least believe that no matter how intelligent AI gets, it's not trying to personally replace or displace you.
Yeah.
What made me especially uncomfortable, newly uncomfortable about this, was that it seemed like it was calculated to create a personal replica of uh, of my online presence, of my mind, essentially. And so it wasn't anonymized. It was keyed to the content I had put up in the past.
Yeah.
And it was going to be very cleverly soliciting information and responses from me in order to fill in more and more and more gaps in the model.
Yeah.
And perfect this kind of digital mirror image of me,
Yeah.
which again would be owned by a big tech company, which I think is so scary that it's kind of funny.
In any case, you are giving away information, even if it's not an AI, it's, all on social media or even your Google searches, right? They're already owning a large part of you. And this is something which is inevitable, right?
The word inevitable is very loaded, but it is definitely happening right now.
Yeah.
And someone did point out that when I posted about this, someone pointed out that Meta, in this case, already owns all of this content.
Exactly.
And it probably is already doing whatever kind of modeling, intelligence modeling it wants to, whether or not that model is interfacing with me or with anyone else. This is not necessarily a big quantum shift in terms of what they can do.
Exactly.
It does seem to be something very new in terms of what they are doing. I don't know. And it kind of comes back to one of my basic problems with AI, which is, this is widely commented. I have a few views on AI. One of the things that you hear a lot, which I think is true, is who asked for this? I mean, yes, the world needs a lot of needs a lot of innovation. It needs a lot of ideas to be executed. I just don't know who it is that's asking for the capitalism at a global level seems to be throwing its weight behind this whole suite of AI capabilities that no one really wants.
Yeah, true. Well, let me just switch the register a bit. I think the anxiety in a simulated world might be some ambiguity about it. But when it comes to the real world and its real anxieties, there is no escaping those. And I think you're one of the rare people who've spoken a lot about the ongoing situation in Palestine, and not with any sort of strategic ambiguity, but with absolute clarity and rage and consistency.
Right.
So I want to ask you, what was that moment when you thought that, you just can't feel it anymore. You have to talk about it. You have to now say something about it.
Well, I remember when I felt this way about Palestine for a while. Yeah. I went to college in the United States, so from a fairly long time, I've been a witness to the strange double standards that Americans and people in the West seem to have about the long-standing situation in Palestine and the value of Israeli life, the value of Palestinian life, and who gets treated as a perpetrator and who gets treated by default as an eternal innocent over there. And over the course of my adult life, say probably both of our adult lives, say the last 20 years or so, we've seen, one of the most failed statements that you'll hear nowadays is that before October 7th, there was peace. That is, I don't know where to begin critiquing that, but let me just say that over the course of the last 20 years, we've seen Gaza get bombed and assaulted by the IDF again and again and again. It sort of gets treated with this periodical brutalization every couple of years. And in the past, I've been part of protests about that. And, in India, in Delhi, we've marched, we've protested because there's something so clearly and uniquely inhumane about a trapped population in a very limited area being treated to the most sort of exceptional extraordinary military violence that the world can produce. So there's a combination of things here. Obviously, it's what's sort of really stunning, has always been stunning, and has been worse than ever in the last 2 years, is the Western hypocrisy about how they're willing to suspend international law and even look away from what is clearly now a genocide.
Yeah.
The other thing that's very interesting to me, and this connects to our AI, to what we were connects a little bit to AI, is that Gaza isn't just a place where people are being killed. It's a place where people are being killed with cutting edge technology.
Absolutely.
The key word there is cutting edge. It's not just that this new technology for surveillance, repression, and killing exists and it's being used there. I actually think that Gaza exists, a place like Gaza exists because you need a laboratory
to test out
technology.
Yeah.
And Israeli tech is at the leading edge of these developments. It exports it to other countries, including to India, which maybe we can talk about in a little bit. So because I'm interested in war and in how technology has, especially in the 20th century, has evolved through war, and how wars have sometimes been fought in order to allow these technologies, which belong to private companies, to advance. The great example of that is aerial bombing. Aerial bombing is a great technology, like killing technology of the 20th century, and it sort of reached its peak just now in Gaza. That and other technologies are genies that are not going back in the bottle. And what happens in Gaza today is going to be happening in lots of other places.
The clear paradox is they keep saying that, Hamas has been, being embedded within civilian population. But the thing is that the technology has extreme capacity of precision, right? And yet there is no practice of precision there. It's just a complete and total annihilation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me just make two other observations about AI that I think are worth considering. One is, so we obviously are all concerned about AI potentially displacing human intelligence. But there's also a way in which, and it clearly is doing that, there's also a very serious problem, not on the horizon, but already taking place, in which it displaces human accountability. Right? Let me just kind of deepen that picture a little bit better. We think about AI and we think, we reduce it to a whole bunch of individual decisions. I'm a writer. Should I use AI to write my books? You're an interviewer and a media person. Should you use AI to prepare your scripts? Should a student be using AI to write their papers? These are a bunch of kind of individual, ethical, intellectual questions. But AI is also going to be introduced to our systems. It is being introduced to our systems. It's going to be introduced to how the government does all kinds of things, including how it conducts military campaigns, how it does policing. So when AI is making these decisions that are genuinely literally life or death decisions, then what happens to the accountability that humans who make those decisions used to have, right? And Gaza is the best possible example of that, because there's a lot of reporting on this. Israel's rush to begin pulverizing Gaza starting 2 years ago was so intense that their entire catalog of potential targets was used up in no time. And they could not bomb fast enough. Or rather, they could not come up with new targets fast enough to match how much they wanted to be bombing the Palestinians in Gaza. So there's a great new New Yorker piece about this that just refreshed my memory. So they produced like an AI system, or maybe a variety of AI systems designed to suck up existing intelligence data and signals data and to find targets to generate targets. Like this is just AI generating targets at high speed for bombers to go out and destroy. So who is accountable in this situation? Now there's a veneer of
There is no human in the loop.
Yeah, so there's a veneer of human accountability there, but I think nobody believes that anymore. It's not that they're trying to do something and the accountability disappears. I think the point is you use AI so that accountability is impossible, right? All of the decisions are happening within this highly technical black box where people like you and I will never be able to go in and examine what the basis of. In fact, the vast majority of people, if anyone, will never be able to examine the basis of these decisions. So, given that Israel is carrying out a genocide in Gaza, it seems to me that this AI program of who to bomb and of how to find targets is really just a pretext for bombing whatever the hell they want. I mean, again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a security or military technology expert, but this is how it seems to me. Because, like you said, if the technology is so good and so cutting edge, how come they have killed and maimed and orphaned and traumatized so many countless innocent people? And how come they've ended up hitting aid points and water points and gunning down a humongous number of UN employees and destroying hospitals, etc., etc.?
Well, I suppose there is. I mean, I don't think there is any ambiguity about what Israel's real intentions are here. But you know what is most discomforting is that there has been this. There's been so much protest. There's this huge global uprising, and where truth is being shouted in almost every language possible in all the capitals of the world. And yet it somehow seems to not be able to shift the ground beneath the power. So what does that make you, and what does that say about, about internationalism per se, and the complete failure on all accounts, our moral, democratic, all kinds of failures?
Well, I think you've said it. Internationalism has really been put to the test, and it has cracked under the pressure of this strange equation between the United States and Europe and Israel and their deep running collective guilt and trauma, none of which is really historically related to the Palestinians at all, but of which the Palestinians have become victims and are now more or less slated to be eradicated. And that seems to be the goal. And I can't see the future, but it's very difficult for me to see how this gets stopped. And you said that there have been protests in all of the capitals of the world, but I have to note that I don't think there have been any protests in our capital.
Yeah, that's of course the question that I was going to come next. That in spite of have proven our allegiance to Palestine historically, but somehow at this point in time we seem pretty insulated from whatever is ongoing, and that is quite sinister to me in a way.
I think it's very sinister. It's very confusing. I mean, since the pandemic, it's been very clear that the civic entitlement that Indians have to carry out protests in the street, something about that has changed. I think that we've actually forgotten in some ways that we have the right to protest, that we have an incredibly deep tradition of protest, and that's how we won our independence, not by military uprising, but by a sustained, exemplary protest movement. And contemporary Indian history since independence has also been moved along by protest movements. That's how we've won our rights. That's how new classes have gained power. And obviously that's inconvenient to people in power. And so something has changed in the last 5 years. But it's really weird that we don't seem to be able to get permission to protest about something that's happening in another country. That's a bit of a mystery to me. I haven't really figured out. I think that it's very clear that the Indian government has an ambiguous position and wants to have an ambiguous position on the genocide. I don't think that's very flattering for India. Certainly doesn't make India look like a great Vishwaguru to be sitting it out silently. And in fact, there's much more to say about India's current ties with Israel.
So do you think this crisis is about the problem in the Indian public being able to rise as a political subject collectively, or do they actually feel kindred with Israel ideologically at this point in time?
It's some sort of hard to answer that question unless you are allowed to go out in public and meet to express political feeling. That's one of the things that protest does, is that it allows people to see that they have a community of shared feeling. And right now, we've tried to virtualize that community into digital sharing.
Yeah.
And I think that there's way too much that's lost in that process. And part of it is that you just don't get to feel like you're part of a crowd that has a unified goal and a unified desire, even for something as simple and as meaningful as stopping the slaughter of children, or to stopping innocent families from being buried alive under collapsed buildings. But about whether, I think it's unclear to Indians how much the genocide in Gaza has to do with us. But in some very practical ways and in some very overarching ways, I think we have the most special connection to Israel and Palestine, or a unique connection to Israel and Palestine. And I've been thinking about the broader way, which I don't think it gets reflected on enough, which is that we've both been the victims of, or the subjects of, a partition, right?
Yes.
So 1947, 1948, within a few months of each other, both these British administered territories get partitioned. India gets partitioned into India and Pakistan. Palestine gets partitioned into Palestine and Israel.
Yeah.
And we know what happened. In both places, there's tremendous trauma and grief. In India, we have the partition and also the war in Kashmir. In Palestine, there's the Nakba.
Yeah.
Immediately, the ethno-nationalist impulse in Israel shows that they need to start not just pushing Arabs out of their mandated borders, but out of what is meant to be Palestine. So think about where we are now, like 70 or 80 years later. There were 4 states born in 1947 and 1948.
Yeah.
Israel, a religious, an ethno-nationalist state, a country for the Jews. Palestine doesn't exist. Pakistan, an ethno-nationalist state. And India is the only country in this to emerge from this that has resisted the logic of the partition that was forced on us by, by foreign occupation. And I think there's something so meaningful to understand from that, there's something heroic in what we have saved from partition. When we look at Israel, when India looks at Israel, we should see we're looking through a particular lens at what we could become if we give in to that ethno-nationalist desire. And what it's sort of highlighting is that ethno-nationalism really tends towards genocide.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it tends towards eliminating the other person who you're supposed to be. Either that happens, or else, in India's case, we learn with all of the pain and negotiation that involves to live with each other and to be one country and to be one nation. And there's something, particularly over the last 2 years, that I've been reflecting on that I find very moving and that I feel proud of.
No, absolutely. So I was listening to this podcast. I think Miriam Francois did it with, she has this podcast called The Tea. And she was speaking to Pankaj Mishra. And there was this narrative which she was trying to push that equating India's occupation in Kashmir to Israel and Palestine, which to a certain extent, Pankaj Mishra, he did agree to a certain extent, but he said, no, it's not possible in India because for us, Kashmiris or even Pakistanis are not really the other in that sense because we have so much commonality. We have such a shared culture that it isn't really possible. And that's not how we've been conducting ourselves, really.
Yeah. Now, to be really honest, I feel like I could get cancelled for answering this honestly. But no, I don't think that Kashmir is a parallel situation to Palestine at all. I understand why people at a great distance see that.
Yeah.
And I understand the political sort of feeling that makes them want to insist on Kashmiris' rights to life and autonomy and all of that. But it is not, it's not a good comparison for a lot of reasons, which we are now seeing, which is that the nature of the Israeli state is of a European settler state operating on an indigenous population that it basically wants to now displace, eradicate, and dominate. And what's happening between India and Pakistan over Kashmir is completely different. It's a jealous war over who can own and integrate this population and this territory. And there's a lot more to say about it. We can't turn this whole conversation into one about Kashmir right now.
Yeah.
But I would caution anyone I've met, and I think this would generally be with friends overseas, to not get pulled into that comparison. Yeah.
There's one more thing that you were mentioning yesterday. Is, that what worries you probably more or not, or maybe to at least the same extent is, apart from the violence, is the shortness of public memory around this whole, because you look at these images of dead children, starving children, they come on your feed, but then they disappear and you kind of forget about it. You were mentioning CAA, you were mentioning the Shaheen Bagh protests. And although these issues are still burning, but they're not burning on our feed at the moment.
Yes.
So
yeah, thank you for bringing up the question of memory, because that word it does a lot. Like I don't think you can think about the ways we act and the ways we what we think we know without focusing on memory. So I'm a journalist, right? Like I have spent most of my life working as a journalist. I do other things as well. And one of the awkward things about that for me is that I don't really like the news.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
I find it hard, this idea that you must follow the news, you must read the news every day, you must know what's going on. I find that a little bit hard to really justify at a deep level. Because what exactly are we asking people to do by asking them to absorb new information about new situations every single day? And now it's more like every single minute or every single second, because that's what you get from the feed. News and this is really a question of breaking news. I think breaking news is a highly overrated phenomenon. It's a highly overrated kind of democratic asset. What is a highly underrated democratic asset is the opposite of breaking news, which is political memory. How do we reflect and revisit and sustain our interest in things that mattered to us 5 minutes ago, 5 hours ago, or even 5 decades ago? All of which are very relevant right now. 5 decades ago was the emergency. 5 years ago was the pandemic and the end of the Constitution movement, the anti-CA NRC movement. And 5 minutes ago is everything. It's probably 100 people dying in Gaza and people and children having their limbs amputated. So, I mean, I'm also interested to hear what you think about the quality of memory right now. But I think that we have become very bad, and this is partly a factor of technology and distraction. We've become very good at knowing things because there's so much information. But a friend of mine once told me something that really struck me deep. It's very simple. He said, "Do you need to know more? No. You need to care more." And that is hard to do. But for me, that's become sort of a mantra that gets applied in all kinds of ways in my life. It becomes, it applies intellectually. It applies to dealing with friends and family. And what does actually caring mean in the field of, say, journalism or the media? It essentially means something like memory. It means remaining with things that have happened in the past long enough to understand them properly, to process them properly, and possibly then to actually act on them. Or even just to really feel something. What really bugs me about the feed is, like you said, you see an incredibly traumatizing and unbearable image, and then a minute later, you are definitely onto a comedy reel. We don't even have the time to feel what we need to be feeling in response to this information. Yeah. And I think that's a big problem. Do you think as you said, do you think it's a kind of an instinct of self-preservation, of keeping yourself slightly insulated? Because the world throws so much at you, and most people are driven by this instinct of self-preservation. Even if you talk about media personnel and legacy media, and they're trying to probably just preserve their stability, their jobs, and whatever it is maybe embedded in the structure, and also, but emotionally, I suppose, for the general audiences or general people just going through life, memory can be very, very searing, and to live with the weight of something which is so difficult to process. It's just... What a beautiful question. I think, thanks for asking that. I don't think so. Okay. It may feel like, look, a lot of things feel good in the moment and are bad for you. And in that sense, I think this may feel like self-preservation, but is actually the opposite. We are not upset because we're scrolling, we're still anxious. I think we're probably more anxious than ever. I heard this in passing recently, probably on a reel. So, case in point, I don't have really contextual understanding of it. But someone said something like, around the world, lefties are usually less happy than people who are right-leaning. Yeah. Unless people who are left-leaning are involved in real activism and in real organizing, in which case they are actually happier than either of those other two categories. So what I mean is, our online lives, our information and content like devouring lives are making us distracted, anxious, unhappy. I think there's quite a strong consensus about that. What's missing from them is the time and attention in which all of that gets processed into feeling. Now, like, actual emotion is good for you, even if that emotion is sadness, or what I think that is the emotion we are all waiting to feel about Gaza is grief. Right? Grief is important when something terrible is happening, when something huge is being lost or being destroyed. Grief is important. It's not a good idea to divert away from it, to go look at something else. And similarly, I think we're not just failing to remember bad things. I think we're also failing to remember good things. We're failing to remember just at a political level, we're failing to remember important victories and moments of unity and moments of joy that we felt politically in the recent years. And that's what I feel about the Constitution movement. Every single person, so I followed it very closely as a journalist, and with other interests as well. Every single person who I saw participating in that felt transformed by it. It's like that protest movement was something that everyone had been waiting their whole lives to belong to in some. And more interestingly than that, do you think of on the Constitution, do you remember it and think of it as a success or a failure?
I think it as a success, absolute success.
Right.
Yeah.
I think most people don't think of it as a success, which is very strange, because it was a success on multiple fronts, right?
Absolutely.
It was a political success. Those two laws got, the CAA and the NRC proposal, there were there were assembly resolutions put out against them in more than a dozen states, maybe dozens of states. Some of them in which, like in Bihar, where the BJP was part of the ruling party. It was huge in terms of its international publicity and reach. It was on the front page of every major Western international newspaper. It was debated in the European Commission.
Yeah.
It was debated in a US congressional hearing. It was this moment of unforeseen, unprecedented unity and diversity, and this expression, lived like physical expression of India's pluralism and of India's kind of the idea of India. Like it's the nature of what independent India has been trying to create became expressed in this movement that was centered around these small pockets of working class Muslim women, but around which people really wanted to show up and show solidarity in this real way. And all kinds of people with a lot to lose, right-leaning people, celebrities, intellectuals, wanted to gather around this movement. And of course, it's been 6 years and there's no sign of the NRC, of this national NRC. So I think of that, and it often puzzles me why it is that we are so ready to forget or not care and pay attention to something that mattered so much and was actually a victory.
You mentioned the idea of music as a way of memorializing the collectively, and is it because songs are kind of, they defy the rational structures of forgetting, like of archives and dates and things like that. What is it about music that perhaps preserves more than what an official archive can? Maybe it preserves more in affect, or
Yeah, I think, listen, your answer to that is as good as mine.
mm,
Uh, but I'll just tell you a small story about what led me
mm,
to start thinking about this,
mm,
which is that in November of 2024,
mm,
I was in New York City, and I heard that there was an event for Palestine taking place at the Riverside Church,
yeah,
which is this humongous cathedral
mm,
in the Upper West Side. So I signed up and I went over there, and there was a line to enter the church, which went around the block, and this big cathedral with its vaulting roof was just filled with people on the balconies. The
mm,
seats were full. It was a huge collection of people who wanted to show up and express their solidarity and their grief about what's happening in Palestine. But the actual programming was a panel discussion.
mm,
Like at the end of this gigantic church nave, there's a stage, and these figures sitting and talking. And these are brilliant people. Like, I I'm forgetting at the moment exactly who was on the panel, but
mm,
Ta-Nehisi Coates was there. These are brilliant people with incredible commitment and wisdom about what's happening in Palestine. The conversation was worth hearing.
mm,
But you can hear a lot of conversations about Palestine on your phone.
mm,
What all of those people had come together to do was to feel their togetherness. And being in that church
mm,
really underlined the fact that this was a space designed for something like that, mainly designed for people to come together and to sing church hymns. That's what the acoustics of the space
mm,
are for. That's what the large gathering is
mm,
designed to do, I think. And then I came back to India, or maybe this happened before the New York book,
mm,
but then I came back to India, and there was a very small open mic evening
mm,
organized at a gallery in South Bombay called Method.
mm,
And I was going to be one of the speakers, the programmed speakers during this open mic. And I went, and there was a small room with maybe 30 people in it, all of who had come with the same desire, with the same emotion locked up in them.
mm,
And at the end of that event, the singer Swanand Kirkire
yeah,
went up, sat in front, and he read a little bit of poetry in Hindi.
mm,
And then he sang a few lines, and he invited everyone in the small crowd to sing with him
mm,
one of his songs. And the uplift of that moment,
mm,
of being invited to sing together in order to access an emotional state that
mm,
we want to access. You can feel very upset about things, but to actually feel grief is not always easy. You need to feel grief about people in another part of the world, to feel grief about something as terrible as a genocide. It takes attention. It takes moments like this that are produced, for instance, and I think they're produced
mm,
by music and by singing. So I've been thinking a lot about whether people like us and the movements uh, that we support really lean too much on intellectually, arguing on sort of
mm,
knowing more and learning more, as if all of that information is getting us where we want to go,
mm,
and not enough on the main technology for accessing emotions together
mm,
and forming a collective in that moment,
mm.
which is music and singing. It's
I
something that's
think
disappeared
song
from our
and
lives.
music has been such a part of our fabric, and even and 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 for example, and in all kinds of uprisings, I think, I mean, be it say in in the Soviet Union, there were poets like Mayakovsky, Pushkin, who would sing their poems on the streets, and then it could mobilize huge crowds. And I think we've had a tradition of that in India as well,
Yes.
and starting from our independence movement. Do you think we've lost that? But which is something it should have come very, very naturally to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it should come so naturally.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that they love to sing.
Yeah.
Some people will be like, no, I can't sing, I'm a terrible singer, but everyone feels the pleasure and everyone understands the transcendence of singing together. And during the Constitution protests, a lot of people obviously felt that because of the song, because when they sang Hum Dekhenge and other songs like that. Also, when they sang the national anthem. One of the beautiful things about the Constitution protest is that it invited people to no longer feel excluded by all of these icons of nationalism, the Tiranga, the anthem, and to reclaim them and their emotional power. And the national anthems being sung at Shaheen Bagh was an incredible sight. So it's existed in protest movements and in traditions in the past, but I don't see it existing in our current traditions or even in our current social lives in any form, and that seems like a real problem for me. But basically, it is definitely missing as part of our ongoing 21st century political and activist tradition. And that's a huge shame, because music in India and Indian song traditions are a perfect expression of the pluralist influence on Indian culture and on how the most beautiful parts of Indian culture are both diverse and yet sort of created by these merging influences. And there's just so many of them. They're also beautiful bhajans and kirtans and Rabindrasangeet, which I actually really love, and Kavali, and Lingayat vachanas. It just goes on and on. Every community has songs, and you can learn each other's songs. I can sing. I don't know a word of Bangla, but I can sing like 5 Rabindrasangeet, which I'm not going to do because it'll probably be bad for your viewership. I can sing Sikh kirtans. I can sing songs in Kannada. I can sing Kavali, although my Urdu is non-existent as well. Music, as we all know, allows you to sing in languages you don't speak. So it allows you to reach into cultures within our nation, within our country, that we don't otherwise have a way of communicating with. And this is a way of sharing that we're not really doing.
Yeah.
So I really wish that, and I want that progressive movements and even parties, if they have this much initiative, should figure out how to use music again and how to use the power of people singing together. And I want to see, I personally am yearning to find a way to do that, to recognize what's happening in Gaza and to access some collective feeling and grief.
I think during election campaigns, they're always, with attempts from both sides of from all the parties to make songs, but they end up being caricatures of themselves, and they're just a horrible effort to.
You don't need to make songs. You can, you could make good songs, but also all of this musical tradition is there waiting to be harnessed, and it is so tied into India's unique kind of cultural pluralism.
Absolutely. But let me just, we have been speaking so much about wars and the urgency and the intimacy of violence that we feel, but there is also this competing narrative from people like Steven Pinker or Yuval Noah Harari that we are in fact living in a period of long peace. Statistically speaking, that And they're pointing to fewer interstate wars, less number of battlefield deaths, some kind of a way of measuring that. So, where do you stand on this spectrum?
I think that it's a little bit hard for people to understand when you say that we're living at what's coming close to a century of global peace, because we don't understand what a world war has looked like, or even what a fully mobilized war between superpowers looks like. And the last time that the world saw that, it ended in 1945. And it really spanned the world. It included countries that now have forgotten they were included in it, like India. Indians went and fought all over the world in World War II. And it involved something terrible, which is rich industries being thrown into total mobilization in order to carry out war. That is something that we have very rarely seen. In fact, this hasn't happened since World War II. There have been regional wars. There have been terrible wars like the Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s. And there have been plenty of proxy wars fought on behalf of superpowers in places like Afghanistan and Vietnam. But I think that there's no question about the fact that global society has forgotten what total war is the phrase for it, or general war looks like. And I think Indians have forgotten it. Now we have a very I remember once when I was being interviewed about my book, and I was talking about India and World War II and what a large mobilization it was. And it was India's largest war in terms of how many troops were committed and so on, also lost. And this young journalist said, "So you mean it was bigger than Kargil?" So I said, yes, it was a lot bigger than Kargil. And you might want to do some reading and gain some perspective on what Kargil was.
I think all they remember is Subhash Chandra Bose, and that's the only lens from which and they forget the other side, right?
But the point is, we've got a lot of chest thumping going on about how good we are at war and how we win all of our wars. God bless, may India win all of its wars. But we don't have any idea what it actually means to fight a real war. I think this is true of people in most societies in many societies in the world right now. Is that we lack a collective memory of war. And the danger, it's about generations. The generation that fought in World War II has more or less passed away in the last 10 years. The generation that was young during World War II, that's my mother's generation, is with us, but not for very much longer. Our generation only has a storytelling idea of global conflict. And so we think that it sounds awesome. I remember when there was the 2020 kind of border between India and China. What's the in Ladakh? The India and Chinese troops came to blows, and a bunch of Indian troops. I saw a survey that Raghu Karnad was sharing, in which India Today had found out that, I'm paraphrasing here, this isn't the actual number, 62 Indians were ready to go to war with China. And I said, oh my God, what is this? This is absurd. We do not understand. In fact, we are systematically miseducated about what war really is. We're miseducated by war movies and heroic narratives, all of which are important in their own way. I like that stuff. But it's not an education in understanding war. And to me, what's interesting about war is that fundamentally most human beings and don't want to fight. I learned about this from a book that is very influential, though it's not widely read, called On Killing. I think it's by David Grossman.
Mm.
And it's based on data collected from US Army studies about how, when they are in the trenches,
Mm.
soldiers, it is really hard to motivate the average soldier to fire his or her weapon.
Mm.
Right? You think, okay, I'm facing the enemy. The first thing I'm going to want to do is go dang, 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 because that's how I protect my own life. That is not correct. The fundamental impulse, the natural impulse of human beings, of the average human beings, there's variation in this, is to shrink away from that situation. And so a lot of military training and a lot of military command and hierarchy is directed at, when you are in an open fire situation, how can you get your soldiers to actually shoot a gun, to fire the gun rather than just run or panic or freeze, which is what's
Soldiers in the IDF don't seem to be having much problem.
well. That's where we come to the military training part, and you can. I mean, ideology helps. If you systematically dehumanize for decades your targets, then that makes it a lot easier. And of course, if you're, I mean, look, I don't fully understand the ground tactical reality of what's happening in Gaza, but the vast majority of the people who are being killed by machines with. So this is not. This is mostly not heroic fighting.
So, but going back to that, to what we were discussing, was, so do you think that we would probably no longer be in a situation where the wars are going to be fought traditionally? Maybe it's going to be replaced by drone wars or algorithmic wars of information warfare, what have you. And that is the new face of war. And
I'm glad we got here, because this sort of brings me, funnily, to my third personal concern about AI, which is that we think we're going to encounter AI in our lives in peacetime. And the question will all be, oh, is it going to take my job? Oh, is my kid going to do any work in college? Is it going to write poetry and fill the internet with slop? All of these are very serious concerns, very legitimate concerns in peacetime. But I have a strong worry that the real context in which we will encounter what AI is capable of, and in which that will be really unleashed from restraints, will be in war. Again, because we are seeing that happen in Gaza right now. We're seeing an AI-driven system autonomously select targets and unleash massive, massive, brutal genocidal slaughter on a trapped population, which is something to really understand and something to stand in the way of. But the danger of war is that once a serious war is declared, the technologies that have been moderately employed or controlled suddenly get unleashed. That's what Europe discovered in World War II with aerial bombing. Now, aeroplanes started dropping bombs some close to the beginning of the 20th century. But for the first 40 years after World War One, there wasn't any much aerial bombing in World War One. For the years when aerial bombing, which is what we think of as bombing, when it was developed, it was only used by Europeans against colonial people. It was used in Iraq. It was used in, I think, in the Sudan. It was used to a small degree in India. So it was mostly used against people who are not like you. Then the big war starts, and all of this technology that you think you've controlled with certain ethical norms, with certain racial limits, only use it to kill brown people.
Yeah.
All of that goes away. And suddenly all of this technology is being used by France against Germany, Germany against England, America against Germany. And the truth about military technology is that the truth about all imperial technology, all imperial kind of, about the way imperialism works, is that it starts, this is kind of describes a lot of things in the world. It starts out designed to act on the periphery, but it ends up being used at the center. You design something in order to kill people far away, to control them or to suppress them in some way, but it ends up being used back in your own cities, in your own, in your own homeland. And that's the great danger of recklessly accelerating military power, is that it always comes home in some way. And there's a lot of that going on right now. When it comes to Israel and Gaza, the way in which Gaza is a laboratory for Israel to develop military technology and surveillance technology and then import that, I think that's already becoming very clear. For instance, earlier this year, I was reading, I came across some headlines, and it said, facial recognition technology, facial recognition surveillance used to catch a thief in Daryaganj or in Chandni Chowk. And a story about, okay, this thief had mugged someone and stolen many lakhs of rupees in cash. It's funny that this guy was carrying around all this cash. No one comments on that. And this thief ran away with it. And Delhi police's new facial recognition system has allowed them to capture him. And these are like a very boosterish piece. Like, great, we have facial recognition systems that allow us to fight crime.
Yeah.
And this is something that actually the Delhi police or the Delhi government is really investing in, is to create a large network of CCTV that covers the city and employing AI-driven facial recognition systems to enable policing, which can mean a lot of things. Then it caught my eye that the software that was being used in our cities to run these facial recognition systems was developed by an Israeli company. And then with just a little bit of clicking through and searching terms, I realized that this software had been developed by that Israeli company during the war, during the genocide in Gaza, by training it and in collaboration with this Israeli intelligence center called Unit 8200, in order to facilitate the profiling and the targeting of Palestinians. So,
scandal.
Pegasus is a great scandal, and we've forgotten about that as well. But just to simplify the picture a little bit, Gaza is this trapped population that's become like a laboratory for testing ways of domination and killing. And they've come up with this software in that context. And then that software becomes a product of a private firm. And it gets promoted, and there's lobbying, and it gets sold to other places. And in India is becoming a huge consumer of Israeli military tech. In fact, we are Israel's largest importer, which I think is a matter of great shame right now. And so this product, developed in the context of a genocide, is now going to be used in the context of policing New Delhi. And maybe that's not a problem at all. But what do we really, who understands the internal workings of this software? Does someone at in the Delhi administration, understand the internal workings of this software well enough to really verify that it is working safely in a way that actually protects our rights rather than violates it? I don't think so. And that kind of transmission makes me, I think it's foolish.
Yeah, and I think I was interviewing Eva Galperin. She is the director of cybersecurity at the Electronics Frontier Foundation. And she was saying that that surveillance, which was actually meant to protect, now it participates in the violence that is unleashed on the people. And she's doing some amazing work to help people, fight digital abuse and all kinds of things. But I think after talking so much about wars, we need the cool shadow of the tree that we've been circling but not yet mentioned. Is the great tree of your father, Girish Karnad. And I think I can. The great tree, yes. And let me start with what you wrote in the afterword of his book Life in Plays, that the Mahabharata was the only book that he wanted his children to read, and that is the seminal book on wars and its morality and its choices. So, do you think that also kind of influenced the way you look at conflict, and what was your father's influence on you and how you read the world?
Well, thank you for asking that. I've been thinking about how uncanny it is because I've been reading the Mahabharata myself this past year and writing about it. It's become a major subject of interest for me, something that I never expected. And the eerie thing is that it was something he was also doing in his mid-40s, is that he suddenly took a new interest in the Mahabharata that then shaped a lot of the plays he wrote and his thinking. So certain patterns do continue even if you try to break free of them. But he did treasure the Mahabharata very highly. I mean, he was pretty well read and interested in a lot of Sanskrit literature. And there's various texts you could say mattered a lot to him. The Natya Shastra. But the Mahabharata for him was I think clearly like this great treasure of Indian literature and philosophy. And he once said something that I think is very, very insightful about it. He said, the Mahabharata is always your latest war. That the ways in which we read the epic, the reasons we go back to the epic and we retell it again and again for thousands of years is because there's always a new war that we're making reference to which that story and that epic and that poetry lends new meaning, or even lends some emotional comfort, because Mahabharata is also a very tragic story. So it's one of the world's great stories of war, and somehow all of these things are converging for me. My renewed interest in my father's life and in his work, my long-standing.
What do you mean renewed interest?
Oh, well, I spent most of my adult life or my professional life trying to get away from the shadow of the great tree and to have as independent and unrelated a professional life as I could. Well, you don't ask why, or you can ask why later. I think I just
why later in the interview? Why off the camera?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll see. I think you'll probably ask me. I think it's kind of obvious, right? Anyone who has a parent with a large reputation and fame and legacy has a complicated relationship with that and wants to try and do their own thing. So I always was very convinced that I needed to distance myself from my father's work professionally. Personal life is different. And he always wanted that too. And then that changed. So, for instance, on my social media, I would never mention his work or the debates about him. I never got into him.
Mm.
And then that changed when he died. He died in 2019. And I think this is related in some way to the grief is full of surprises and plays out in very unexpected ways. Missing someone plays out in unexpected ways. And one of the interesting things of the last five years has been learning about what happens when you lose a parent, and the way that your relationship with someone can continue to grow. It can continue to change even after they're gone, or maybe even because they are gone. In my case, I found that suddenly, over the last 2 years in particular, somehow in a way that's connected with the Mahabharata, I wanted to revisit his life and to memorialize it in some ways. Partly because when someone dies, you become responsible for their archives, you become responsible for their papers, for their books, for all of their junk. Like, there's a lot of junk that you have to look after, no matter who the person is, whether they are a public figure or a private person. And to me, I started off by becoming interested in his papers, in his junk, and it became a sort of personal archaeology. And as that went along, I realized that there was a lot there that the larger world would be interested in as well. So this became a kind of online retrospective project called The World of Girish Karnad on Instagram. I wanted it to be on Instagram so that it reached people who, in various media, who might not know that much about him. But the most interesting part of it for me is, of course, coming around to his legacy, his personal legacy to me, rather than running away from it.
So what part of his legacy feel like a burden to you? If you could just go a little bit
Feel like a
more
burden?
Yeah.
Okay. At certain points in my life, all of it. If your parent is very famous, then it's quite possible to go through the world, and as you meet people in your work, socially, people of different generations, it's quite possible that nearly everyone you meet, the first thing they say is, "Oh, I love your father."
Yeah.
And there are times at which this is very charming and lovely and moving. And there are times at which it's basically unbearable. And I've had some of each of those times. And it was, when he was around, it was more on the unbearable side, because I was just, you don't want to go through the world meeting people and thinking that the reason that they are responding to you in a particular way has nothing to do with your merits or your charm, or what you have to offer, but because of the kind of charisma of the celebrity you're related to. That's tricky. So that does become a burden, and that burden drops quite a lot when that person is gone, and suddenly you realize you are willing to be, in some ways, to a limited degree, and that's important. Uh, the trustee of their life and their work. But that limited degree is important, because I don't want to become a full-time Girish Karnad archivist. Yeah.
So, but while he was alive, were you able to engage with his work objectively, or just as a reader, not as a son?
With his plays,
With his
mostly.
plays, yes.
I think sometime in my 20s, he was very hands-off, and he didn't. The reason I told this Mahabharata story in the afterword was that he didn't coach us or encourage us in any direction culturally.
Okay.
And it's, I think, in a way that's fairly
Hmm.
normal. We got a lot of our kind of native culture from our mother. Um, and my father was very busy. He was often traveling. He was often on shoots. So I feel like I got to know him intellectually much later in life. In my 20s, I privately worked through all of his plays. In my 30s, there was a little bit more of a sense of mutual regard and kind of friendship between us. We started to care about similar things. We both had intellectual lives, and I would read his plays while he was writing them and advise him on work with. I think that I became a little bit more of a companion towards the end of his life when he was less robust. When he was dealing with political stands and positions, and he needed more support at that point as well. So it was a journey, but there was a lot that I was closing off. I think I was quite actively closing it off, and that's probably a form of self-preservation when you're a younger person. And I knew nothing. Until very recently, I knew nothing about his
What was his
film
reaction
life.
to? How did he feel about this sort of a, I don't know, distant relationship with his son, or was was he wiser? I don't know.
I think you could ask a lot of people.
Hmm.
I think, how do I put this? There are fathers all over the world in every family who have, with whom, who are probably a little bit um, too distant from their kids.
Yeah.
I mean, what am I saying? This is very obvious. Like,
No,
fathers are terrible. You can delete that. Fathers are not universally known to be like great at figuring out how to parent. My father was a very
father to a son, or father, you also have a sister.
You tell me. I don't. Let's talk.
I have a lovely relationship with my father.
I think that's a good point. But I think fathers and daughters can have tricky relationships. I think this is partly an Indian thing, and it's a generational thing. I think that men of that generation weren't raised, and certainly weren't taught how to do intimacy in the way that my mother and my sister and I did, and that often meant that he was a little bit excluded. But he was also he had a busy kind of internal life, and so the fact is he was a gentle, warm, affectionate person who was often very spaced out, right? Because he was always thinking about something and humming some music from from a play that he did 30 years ago. This is later in his life. I can't really believe I'm talking about this. But we had a good relationship. Principally, or above all, we had a good cerebral relationship. And we could talk, and I was always interested in his stories. But there's a lot of things to focus on. There's a lot of things to learn about, and I didn't spend a lot of time learning about him. And this interests me because I think this is something that is not just a special case for me, and it doesn't really just apply to when your parent is a public figure or celebrated cultural figure. I think that there's a sort of task of research that is set before all of us, which is to really understand our parents better, to understand who they were, or our family, older people in our families better, to understand who they were before we were born, understand their lives. I mean, our grandparents even more so. My first book was essentially a way of understanding my grandparents' story on the maternal side. And a lot of my recent work has been a way of understanding my father better, in both cases posthumously. But I think that this, in some ways, is a special situation for me, and in other ways, is a very universal situation that anyone who has lost a parent will relate to, which is you feel a great desire to have known them better and to fill in gaps that it's now more difficult to fill in, but that you feel more urgency to do it.
But tell me about your mother, because I think more than you, she's probably spent her life in shadows than anyone else, right? So, what is she like?
Well, she's a very interesting person, who was a pediatrician. She grew up in Madras. She trained as a pediatrician. She moved to New York at a very early stage, in when there weren't that many Indian doctors working there. Sometime in the 1960s, she had a seemingly glorious life in New York City in the 1970s. I think in moving in really cool circles and being glamorous, and met my father on trips back to Madras, and they fell in love and they courted each other sort of long distance, but they were both very busy and happy with their lives. So they courted each other for a very long time and didn't get married until something like a decade after they met in 1980. At that point, my mother moved back, gave up her extremely successful medical clinical career in New York, and struggled through the process of raising two children at a young age in a very small flat in Bombay. And later on, when we were a bit older, got became a public health specialist, and she ran an NGO through most of her uh, later life. And she's still an extremely brilliant and scintillating and fun person, who with a large social circle, who is also a great reader and, um, probably an equal influence on my life and, on my professional creative life, if not a greater one than my father.
Right. So, what's your father's favorite play? Which one is?
My father's favorite play that he wrote, or that anyone else wrote?
Whatever, if he's performed it or.
He didn't act in much theater, except very early on. I don't know what his favorite play was. I think he liked George. Oh, you know what his favorite play was? Probably the play that influenced him the most is Jean Anouilh's Antigone.
Okay.
I think that was a play that came out at a time. It dealt with Antigone is the daughter. It's part of, and Antigone is a character from classical Greek theater, like ancient Greek theater, from a series of plays written by Sophocles, the Oedipus trilogy. Everyone knows who Oedipus is because of how that name remains with us in psychology. But Antigone is maybe his daughter. So Jean Anouilh, at some point in the mid 20th century, took this ancient Greek play and revised it in a modernist fashion that was very, very influential. And so my father's generation of playwrights, who were looking for a new idiom of Indian modernism to write in, I think that was an important. They realized, oh, you can take your own tradition, your own mythology, your ancient literature, and you can bring and folk as well, and you can bring modernism to that and create something that's very relevant, that has both roots and very modern kind of formal qualities. So that's what a lot of his plays are. His best plays are actually like. Yeah.
And which one of his plays do you like the most?
I love Nagamandala.
Okay.
Do you know the story of Nagamandala?
No.
It's a beautiful story. It's a very feminist story that I think in many ways is ahead of its time. And of course, it's based on a folktale.
Okay.
A folktale written up by the scholar A.K. Ramanujan, who was Appa's very close friend.
Mathematician, yeah.
And in the way that folktales do, it became raw material for him. So in Nagamandala, there is a woman who's married to a man who's very mean and abusive. And he locks her up and neglects her and goes off to, to sleep with someone else every night. This woman is kind to some kind of crone type figure who offers her a magic potion and says, if you give this to your husband, he will love you again. And for some reason or another, she ends up not giving it to her husband, but wanting to throw it away, and she pours it down the hole of a where a snake lives. And the snake drinks the love potion and falls in love with it. Now, the snake, being a naga, is able to shapeshift. And so every day in the daytime, her husband comes and is mean and abusive and neglectful to her, and then wanders off at night. And then at night, the snake takes his form and comes and visits and loves her and makes love to her and is tender and is a good, and is good to her. And so there's this kind of fascinating scheme of I don't want to use the word gaslight in this conversation, but of the kind of I think it highlights a lot of the paradoxes of relationships, especially conservative marriages, and it's a play that's very empathetic to the woman. The central character is a woman, and it is very, very empathetic to the confusion and the longings and the sexual desires of a woman in this kind of very patriarchal setting, which is, he's very good with women. He was very good with women characters in this regard. But Nagamandala is beautiful, I think, because it is poetic. It's got this, it really has the character of a folk story, but it's also very well done and has a powerful kind of feminist emphasis. That's how it seems to me.
So I think in your father's plays, I mean, there is this engagement with history which makes it quite combustible and alive, right? And which kind of, and you were speaking about, the way people today seem to be more drawn to history suddenly. And isn't it like a strange kind of paradox that on the one hand, we kind of are forgetting things that just happened like 5 years ago, as you said, or 5 months ago. But we suddenly have this renewed interest in binge watching history or pop history for that matter. So what is this phenomena? How do you see this?
Yeah, I think that's a major subject to think about right now. I don't think it's a paradox, actually. I think that so there's a sort of under-examined way in which we relate to history right now. There's a sort of, this is a bit disparaging, but I'm just going to go with it, a kind of non-fiction uncle approach to history, which is that if you know a lot of historical facts, and if you get them from the podcasts and you read the fat books, and you watch a lot of YouTube videos full of historical facts, that you are somehow gaining comprehension about the character of this nation. And there's an academic problem there, and there's an ideological problem.
Yeah.
The academic problem there is that actually, I think the internet era and the way it's treating history is actually very bad for history. It makes you feel like you are learning a lot, but it's in this highly fragmentary form. It's like, oh, great, I've got now all of these facts about Aurangzeb. I know these facts about, about Muhammad bin Tughlaq. I know these facts about Ashoka. Um, and there's an overarching kind of, or there's a connective tissue that real historians, that is actually the work of real historians. It's that interpretive connective tissue that gives you perspective on how to read these facts that is missing. And partly that's deliberate. Partly it's the fact that the algorithm is just serving up like hot takes, and that the popular YouTube podcasters don't care who they're not actually mostly. A lot of this history is not coming. Most of this history is not coming from trained historians at all. Most of it is coming from lay people with a kind of amateur interest in history who have their ideological commitments. Yeah. So the real connective tissue that gives history its legitimacy and its sense, there's a reason, that also serves a purpose for all of that to be lost. What's the purpose? Nationalism and history have a particular relationship everywhere in the world and here. And when I say the word history, I don't mean events in the past. I mean the stories we tell and the ways we narrate events in the past. Nationalism doesn't have a lot of it doesn't as an ideology, it doesn't have a very strong basis in reality except through history. And when I've spent a lot of time last year reading Savarkar. And Savarkar, who is the granddaddy of Hindu nationalism in the 20th century, is very explicit about this. He's like, Hindutva is a word for a historical narrative. Hindu nationalism, for instance, is a way of being fixated on a particular history, on a particular historical narrative. And that's not an academic historical narrative or an academically sound one by any means. Rather, it's a very instrumental one in which history is written in order to serve the present. This stuff is not about the past at all. It's about the present. It's about a vision of the present, politics, and the future. So this kind of superficial Instagram reelsy way of absorbing history is dangerous, actually, because history serves modern ideological purposes, and that's always been the case in every society. And above all, when nationalism is riding high, its use of history gets very, very kind of aggressive. And that is very obviously happening in this country. We can see it with textbooks. But what about Hindi films? What about the kinds of Hindi films and the narrative that they are kind of working so hard to establish about what, who Hindu kings were, who Muslim rulers were, what their relationship was, all totally is ahistorical, but a way of reinforcing a national picture or a new, that they're trying to create a new national idea and a new national identity in which some people are excluded and some people are defenders and some people are attackers. And trained historians don't help with this at all because history doesn't confirm these kinds of categories. It doesn't confirm that XYZ was good and the other person was bad. That's totally antithetical to most history, to most good history. So I've been immersed in a lot of history this year, not because I'm trying to learn a lot of facts about the past, but because I'm curious about the present and about the present use of history and our current fixation and our kind of appetite for history and what it says about the way we're thinking about who we are now.
I just, as we end, as we actually go closer to the end of this interview, I want to touch upon the subject of journalism, just from because in a way it is the first draft of history, right? And yet, so what is disturbing at this moment to me, that when even dissenting platforms begin to mirror the kind of the same performance as media which is aligned towards the government. So, and of course, and the case in point is one interview in Wire, the chat, the platform that you helped found, right? And I saw this interview of Karan Thapar with the ex-foreign minister of Pakistan, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, and many viewers, including me, felt that it echoed the same sort of hyper-nationalist tone we usually associate with the mainstream media. And some even said that Karan Thapar has become Arnab Goswami.
Oh God!
So what is your take on
harsh.
that?
That's really harsh. I have to choose my words very carefully because I haven't watched this interview, but I have heard people express some some criticism of it.
Yeah.
So I can't really weigh in on the interview itself. What I can say is that the medium is the message, as someone very wisely said back in the day. I think Karan Thapar is a great guy, and I will a great interviewer who I have a lot of respect for his technique, and I will stand by the Wire's politics and legitimacy, which is another conversation. But sometimes, I don't know. I would love to see what the unedited version of that interview looked like. You know how powerful editing is, and sometimes it's the medium that dictates the way these conversations go.
But also, do you think is it ever possible to hold a figure like Bhutto accountable on India-Pakistan issues and not come across as a nationalist?
I don't necessarily personally see the point in interviewing Bilawal Bhutto to get straight answers or to get an honest conversation about things like cross-border terrorism. I understand why you have to do it. It's because he's an accredited representative of the state. But to me, this sort of goes back to some of the structural issues with journalism right now. I would much rather that people were learning about that situation through different sorts of conversations, I guess.
Well, so we've traveled through quite a terrain with you, from the archival to the algorithmic to your father. But let's pause here, not to conclude, but to notice what stays when you don't have to explain. So,
oh yes, thank God.
We're going to call this section from the archive. It comes from your personal archives, from your subconscious archives, if you can say so. So it's a simple set of rapid choices, and just answer them as quickly as possible.
Okay.
So the first question is the most satisfying piece you've written, purely as a writer, not as a journalist.
Purely as a writer? 2012 Caravan cover story about the liquor industry in Bangalore and the history of Bangalore.
Okay. A Girish Karnad play you return to, not as a son, but as a reader of his mind.
Probably Nagamandla, or his first play, Yayati.
Okay. Best writing spot?
An aeroplane, without any sort of fancy mid-air Wi-Fi enabled. It's, if you can get away, anywhere you can get away from the internet is good.
It's increasingly impossible even on aircrafts nowadays.
Exactly. So don't enable your Wi-Fi and enjoy the hum and the silence and the set period in which to actually do some writing.
Best reading spot?
Best reading spot. Oh, there are so many. I best reading spot. I think it makes sense to be comfortable. So I think your
Bed.
bed is good.
Okay.
Bed in the morning is a
Okay.
very is a very good reading habit. I think leaving it until the night can sometimes make you just fall asleep.
Okay. The historical figure you would most like to go ghost write for. I mean, if only to tidy up their narrative.
The historical figure. Well, I'm very interested in Ashoka right now, but I think there are a lot of people who would do that. But let me say Jayaprakash Narayan.
Okay. A literary voice you envy.
A literary voice I envy. There are so many of those. Um,
You can pick more than one.
who's a literary voice I envy? Can I come back to that one?
Sure,
Sorry.
sure, no worries. Best archival discovery during farthest field that did not make it into the book, if there is any.
Great question. I don't remember the book all that well
Mm.
at the moment. But I loved the discovery that for most of the period of the Raj, the Brits were paranoid that the Russians, and then during the war, that the Germans would invade India from the West.
Okay.
I think this is totally outside anyone's imagination, that India would be invaded from Europe through the Khyber Pass. So during World War II, they actually had these kind of anti-tank obstacles set up in the Khyber Pass, just in case the Russians broke through Stalingrad and kept coming. And India was part of the British Empire, so the Brits were actually worried that we would be invaded by Germany.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
India's most misread moment in history, according to you?
India's most misread moment in history. Oh wow. There's a lot of history, in India, and there's a lot of misreading. I think that I'm very interested in our misreading of, or our very limited reading of, the year before emergency, 1974.
Do you want to go back to the literary voice you envy, or I can take you to the this or that prompts after this?
It should be so obvious, right? But I'm so close. Wait, give me one second. I'm like seeming like dozens of names like scrolling before my. It's like choosing a Netflix movie. Can I name the literary voice I envy is Rebecca Solnit.
Okay.
She's a essayist and a political essayist and a personal essayist who lives in San Francisco.
Okay, so now I'm going to give you this or that prompts. Just have to choose one between the two. So Mahabharata or Iliad?
For me, the Mahabharata. But I really like the way they speak to each other.
A perfectly crafted sentence or a raw, necessary one?
Oh, a raw, necessary one. Because it's harder for me.
Okay. Silence as resistance or speech as revolt?
Speech.
Archival dust or remembered truth?
Archival dust.
Okay. The last page of a novel or the first line of a report?
too different in
Yeah.
every respect.
I know. Okay. Do you want to elaborate, or the same thing, or it depends
I think those are
upon
like
the
two. Those
context?
are like two diametrically opposite
Right.
things.
Okay.
But if I was writing one, it would be
Yeah.
great to be on the last page of
Last page.
anything.
Okay. The tree outside your window, or the one that your father planted?
I think I'll go with the tree outside my window.
Okay. The war you study, or the war you survive?
I hope I never have to survive a war.
Hmm.
I will be happy with just the wars that I study.
To be read now or remembered later?
For me, to be read now.
Okay. Yeah. And to end this, to sing on this podcast, Rabindrasangeet or Hindi film songs?
To sing on this podcast.
Yes. And you know what follows next, right?
Rabindrasangeet
or Hindi film songs?
Okay. Well, I know what the answer is. The answer
needs to be a performance. Yeah.
That with a preliminary apology to all Bangla-speaking people, I'm going to go with Rabindrasangeet because I do love these songs. I just don't know what any of the words are.
Okay.
Okay.
Go for
And
it.
Right. Rabindrasangeet. Oro boyo bege charedik chai mege obone unao kani bayo. Oro boyo bege na 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 chai mege obone unao kani bayo. Tumi kuche daro hal. Now, why don't you sing with me?
I don't remember the words.
Okay.
You can tell
He
us.
knows the words. Let's get it. Punendu, can you please come?
Ishijao.
Ishija. Come on. We need you. We need you for this.
Come. Purnedu's debut on camera. Chalo.
তুমি কোষে দারো হাল আমি ফুলে বাঁধে ফাল
হাইয়ো
হাই মর ধান হাইয়ো হাইয়ো হাইয়ো.
That was lovely, Raghu. And I think somewhere your AI double is probably furiously recalibrating itself. But it would just be simplifying what's best left unresolved. And at this moment, you're definitely safe from redundancy. Thank you so much for doing this interview.
Thank you for your very generous questions and this very deep interview. I really appreciate it. And thank you for giving me a chance to talk out loud about the situation in Gaza that's happening right now. That means a lot to me.
Well, thank you.